All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about the powering up your availability with Veeam's V10 and OffsiteDataSync's cloud-based backup and DR as a service offerings. My name is Jim Jones. I am a senior cloud architect here at OffsiteDataSync, and I'm joined by Anthony Spiteri of Veeam. Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for letting me join the call. Yeah, my name's Anthony Spiteri. I'm a senior global technologist in the product strategy team at Veeam.
Yeah, so just a quick glance at the agenda. We're going to start with Anthony talking about Veeam in general and some of the best practices with Veeam backup and replication V10. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why to use a Veeam certified service provider in 2020. And then we'll do a final wrap up with an exclusive promotion for you guys that have joined the call today.
All righty. So Jim, just before we start, we just make sure everyone's on mute. I just heard a couple of people that were off mute. So maybe for those that are hosting, just place everyone off on mute, except me, Jim, that would be good.
Hey, you can put me on mute. Easy.
Excellent, good stuff. So yeah, firstly, it's great to be here and chat with Jim. Jim's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a few years. Before I joined Veeam, I actually worked for a cloud and service provider similar to ODS, but in Australia, ANZ, called Zetagrid. I was the lead architect there for about 3 years, and before that worked in the service provider space all my career. So the Veeam Cloud and Service Provider program is something that's very passionate to me. I joined Veeam because of it. And I love working with our partners because I feel like, they take our platform and really enhance it to the next level and leverage all the great functionality and features that we have to offer it to their resellers, their partners, and their customers. So it's good to be here, Jim. Let's start off and talk about, the value that Veeam offers with our VCSPs. And, Veeam at its core was founded with, these 3 core values: simplicity, flexibility, and reliability, okay? The simplicity of the product, the simplicity of the platform that was Veeam Backup Replication was something that, for us, was part of our initial success. And that lent itself into reliability, understanding that though the product was simple, the fact that you could install it within 7 clicks, we had great reliability for what was a new way to do backup for virtualized environments when we started out initially back in 2008 timeframe with our first release. And then flexibility. Being software defined, hardware agnostic is critical to our success, and critical especially to our success in service provider land, because I know personally that when I was designing and managing these platforms, the ability to leverage scalability and agnosticity that comes with software-defined infrastructure and software was really important. I think the last point there is actually good to talk about as well, the fact that it is cloud-ready. A lot of the stuff that we build, and we'll see this in the slides coming up, has cloud in mind. And when we have cloud in mind, we're talking about the ability to give our partners like ODS the ability to leverage the great technology to offer services to you guys.
Yep.
So let's see if I can move forward and go through, Jim. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, there we go. Oops. It's always interesting, Jim. I'm about 600 millisecond. I'm about 600 millisecond round trip from you at the moment, so there's a bit of latency. We love it. So what I wanted to talk about to start with is this concept of where Veeam's at from a vision point of view. Looking at cloud data management as our core vision strategy that we announced about 12 months ago, refined it at the beginning of the year when things were normal, in January before everything went a bit askew. But effectively what we're talking about here is the fact that your data is your data. Okay, this has been one of Veeam's core beliefs from the start. We don't lock you in. And we'll talk a little bit about how we achieve that later on. But ultimately, you guys that are here understand that data sits in private clouds. And by private clouds, I mean, your on-premises platforms, even your data centers that some organizations might own. And that's traditional, IT. As we've moved over the last 10, now looking at 10 plus years, maybe even 10 to 15, it's kind of scary to say that the public cloud has grown. And the public cloud for me involves the hyperscalers, but also more importantly, involves service providers like ODS that offer infrastructure as a service, right? So what has happened is the data has shifted from on-premises, from data centers to infrastructure service providers. But then also we understand that data sprawled as well. It's over and across everything. So the whole hybrid and multi-cloud scenario is very much in vogue at the moment. That's kind of where things have settled. It's not either on the left or right of that kind of picture. It's spread across, the whole realm there. And when we look at the outside of this, these are the cornerstones of our cloud data management theory. So backup and recovery, it all starts with that. The ability to back up and the ability to recover is still core to everything that Veeam does. And we believe we've got one of the best and most reliable technology platforms that delivers that, certainly. Yeah. When you look at governance and compliance, that's become more and more prevalent. We all know, we don't like to talk about it much, do we, Jim? But we know that it's there. Understanding that, we've got this, GDPR and whatnot, all the regulations that come into play dictate how long you keep your data, where you keep it, and then in what form. That's pretty much what it's all about. So at Veeam, we want to make sure that we're governing that as well. Automation and orchestration, that's important. For me personally, I love this because it really gives customers and our partners especially the ability to do great things with great technology. Without the endpoints, without the APIs, without the ability to do more repeatable things consistently, you don't get scale. And that's very important from a service provider point of view. Monitoring and analytics, that is extremely important as well, to have visibility into your data, not just from a VCSP point of view, the cloud providers, but also from a customer or tenant perspective. Having the ability to see where your data lives, what form it's in, where it's living. Again, it goes back to the fact that your data is your data. And lastly, which we'll touch on again a little bit later on, is cloud mobility, something that we've talked about for a long time now, but it's really about the portability of your workloads, not being locked in. Again, it goes back holistically to that center where it is your data. We don't want to lock you in no matter where it is. We want to make sure it's available and there for you. And how we're doing that is with a single platform. So Veeam is a platform now. It's an ecosystem play and it's a platform. Whereas even when I started at Veeam nearly 4 years ago now, there was probably about 3 products. We now have, I think at last count, 14 or 15. It's a bit crazy, Jim. And even as a Vanguards, we've seen that evolution, right? Yeah. But certainly it all still starts with backup and replication, like I talked about. We have this universal storage API layer, which is an integration point into a lot of our storage partners, again, highlighting the fact that we are agnostic. And I know from an OffsiteDataSync perspective, that gives them great flexibility in what they use for their storage platforms underneath. They're not locked into any particular appliances or anything like that, which obviously, from my point of view, just impedes innovation and design. Orchestration is important, like we've talked about. Monitoring analytics, we've touched on those points before. Where it gets interesting is at the top, and as we kind of evolve that and we look at the way this works, we look at the cloud. So we're looking at, again, like I talked about, OffsiteDataSync as a service provider in our Veeam Cloud and Service Provider program. We've got the traditional sort of hyperscalers, the Holy Trinity, as I like to call them as well. I mean, Google Cloud's not there, but that's another one that we could put into play. But effectively what we're saying here is that we're offering the platform to cover the protection of data and workloads across all of these platforms. Okay, like I said, it's a multi-cloud world. So cloud, SaaS, virtual, and physical. At the bottom there, just highlighting the fact, again, through the universal storage APIs, that we have the ability to cover lots of different agnosticity in storage, but also more importantly, object storage, which Jim and I will talk about a little bit later on. Cloud mobility. So when I talk about that, again, it's literally talking about the protection and portability of workloads across any cloud platform, or any platform, to be fair. It doesn't even have to be a cloud platform, right? We're utilizing cloud scale storage and how to actually protect the data. And then we're using universal licensing as well to make sure that when your data is portable, when you activate the mobility aspect of it, you don't have to think about licensing. That's all what comes in our new universal licensing. And we all hate talking about licensing in a nutshell, but to be fair, what this does is it simplifies it from a certain point of view, so you don't worry. As the workload transfers from one platform to another, it's basically got that same license. It's just a less of a headache. Now, when we talk about one of the biggest, attractions of Veeam, for those that don't know, it's our portable data format. And this portable data format enables a lot of that portability and flexibility that we talked about. The VBK format is self-descripting or self-describing. So what it means that within a VBK file, we have metadata, and then we have pointers which basically point to the data itself. That means that that VBK file is absolutely transportable. So Jim, you would have, you and I are about the same vintage. You would have used zip files back in the 90s, right?
Yep, a lot.
So yeah, so we all, yeah, you would have had a virus on it though, probably. I mean, that's every zip file on 3.4 floppy had a virus. But the key point is, if you had a virus, yeah, if you had some virus protection software, and you actually took a zip file from the 90s and you unzipped it now, you can still unzip it, right? And we're talking now 30 years almost, you know, in terms of what that means. The VBK format is like that. We provide an extraction tool for free, which means that no matter what, the data is your data, and you have access to this portable data format. You can copy the file, all the files, depending if they're a chain of files or a single VBK file, in any data format, any platform that's agnostic of hardware, that's agnostic of operating system, of file format, and access that data. Okay. Now, the other important part of that is the fact that if you look on the left-hand side, we don't care exactly where the data comes from. As long as it comes and it sits in the repository in the VBK format, we can then recover that to anything. That's our big play. Without the need to do any fancy conversions or complex things, it just works, to use an old Veeam adage. So that's really important. Again, Jim and I will touch on that a little bit later on with some of the discussion for the features. So with that, what we wanted to do was basically touch on some V10 top VCSP highlights, and then have a bit of a discussion with Jim and I back and forth about how ODS are leveraging these features, or looking to leverage these features to offer some value and more service opportunities to their customers, partners, and resellers. So, you know, V10 was released in February 18th from memory. If my memory serves me right, it seems like a long time ago now, but it wasn't that long ago, Jim. But look, I think from that point, it was a fairly big release. And we're going to cover, I think, 3 or 4 features specifically which pertain to, I believe, the ability for VCSPs to offer more services around the Veeam platform. So we're going to start with instant VM recovery, or enhanced instant recovery. And, you know, the core component of V10 was the ability to instant recover any backup from any platform to vSphere. Okay. Which means that even if you had a Veeam agent backing up a physical Windows laptop, on the other side of the world, as long as it got into a repository, if you took it into Cloud Connect as an example, which OffsiteDataSync offers a service, they could then recover that into the vSphere platform, or vCloud Director as well, just quietly. So there is a machine that was it was an endpoint, it was a laptop. You use the agent to basically copy it into a repository. From the Veeam console at that point, you can right-click and even do an instant Veeam recover and say, here it is, it's going to load up straight away. So that was actually really interesting and a big feature there. We also enhanced the ability of the instant recovery to do multiple VMs, which just offers a bit of parallelism in terms of power. And, you know, Jim will talk about it in a second, but I think it also enhances the ability for you guys to offer more services around that, because you can offer more on-demand, sort of almost DR at that point. And again, just increase performance as well. So, you know, it must be said, instant VM recovery was something that we brought to the market first back in about 2010. It's a payment technology, and we continue to build on it. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about how ODS leveraged instant VM recovery, maybe previously, and then how you're looking to leverage the V10 enhancements to it.
Yeah, so we have always, one of the big differentiators for OffsiteDataSync is that we have always provided IaaS resources available to our customers to not only allow us to perform DR tests on your schedule so that you can hit your compliance goals, but also in a situation of a lights out scenario of needing a disaster recovery declared. And we can move your workloads from running from your backups that you've copied up to us into our vCloud Director installation. That worked before just for vSphere. Well, now we actually have that capability for pretty much any kind of workload that you're bringing into us. So, you know, whether it be Nutanix, Hyper-V, physical boxes, whatever, we now have the capability to take those backups and create you a one access point environment that you can then access and either do DR testing or truly run your business from for the short term or the long term. It's actually been very powerful for us.
Yeah, and when you look at that, I mean, that's a great feature. I love, you know, I guess the innovation in that as well, because what you're looking at is something that not necessarily was an automatic thing in terms of the platform, but you guys have, you know, worked out a way how to manipulate the feature set to get it to a point where you can productize it, which is fantastic, which is what great providers do. So how would, you know, the enhanced scalability and multiple VM recovery that is in V10, how that enhance that for you guys? Like I can only imagine it would mean that you'd get your customers back up and running quicker.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, it's not only a matter of getting up and running much quicker, which is absolutely true, but you know that portable format, and then being able to leverage that against the enhanced incident recovery or different restore scenarios in general. You know, one thing about OffsiteDataSync is we have a very qualified staff. Myself, our other solutions architect, Brad Jervis, are both Veeam certified, VMware certified, you know, across the gamut. We have a variety of other team members that are as well. If you're looking at, you know, making that cloud journey or that transition from this technology to another, we can, through this especially, help guide and lead that transition for you. It's, you know, like I said, the portability and the capability to leverage all of this is really powerful and makes our life faster and your life better.
Awesome. All right, so let's skip ahead. Not sure if I went one too far there. Oh, that latency coming into play again. All right, so okay. So incident VM recovery aside, which is again, it's one of my favorite features. When you first see that as an admin, seeing that work, it's actually a thing of beauty. Actually, the way that it actually does its thing, and the thing that being pioneered that is actually, you know, really something that we're proud of. So here we go with backup and replication V10. We enhanced our cloud tier for SOBR. So, you know, this feature again, probably something that from our point of view, well, perception was it wasn't a cloud provider play to start with in terms of how we did the cloud tier, because effectively, you know, instead of what we did is we took Scarlet Backup Repository, which is our software-defined repository where you have a top-level namespace. You can then put different extents. They could be from any sort of storage. Like obviously here on the left-hand side, we've got DAS, NAS, a data appliance. That becomes your landing zone, your performance tier, okay? And then what we did in Backup Replication 9.5 Update 4, we released the cloud tier, which had a simple move policy, right? Which let you shift data from the performance tier, actually shifted them, took it out and extracted it from the actual VBK format, moved it to a capacity tier, and the capacity tier was backed by an S3, Amazon S3, a Blob or an IBM Cloud. So this is an interesting feature because, you know, it basically allowed infinite scalability to a certain extent and solved a problem, right, Jim? Because I think even for cloud providers, knowing, I mean, I managed Cloud Connect infrastructure for a long time. One of the biggest problems that I always dealt with was the growth of the platform, dealing with, you know, new storage, dealing with new shelves, new power, new data centers, that sort of stuff. And really the idea of the performance tier and capacity tier is to make that simplified, make that landing zone more simple, right? So when I talk about this, I'm talking about this in the context of how it helps our cloud providers. And I think that's really important. Have you got anything to mention about that, Jim, yourself, or?
Yeah, so we leverage the cloud tier in SOBR to power up our what we call chilled storage option, which allows you to take, so if you're a customer that's doing backup copy and you'd like to leverage doing the grandfather, father, son set of data, we can leverage that capacity tier to offload those old, just for compliance sake, backups off to, very cheap cloud storage. Now, the counterpoint and the thing, cloud tier is absolutely an awesome technology. My counterpoint that I always put out there is, when we start talking about the restore scenarios from cloud tier, they are absolutely doable, but they aren't the turnkey, easy to do, scenario that you're going to look at from working with a VCSP such as OffsiteDataSync. So again, to just kind of, so let's walk through the entire process of how this would kind of work for you as a customer to leverage that capability, but still keep the power of restorability with your with OffsiteDataSync. So you would do your backup on premises and have all your local data set and set up your backup copy job the same way that you always did before. Okay, and your backup copy then starts coming to OffsiteDataSync or any other VCSP. But when you configure the job, if you set the grandfather, father, son, and you choose to be in the option to let us offload that to capacity tier, those GFS restore points, the weekly, the monthly, the yearly, automatically, they keep the placeholders in our data center to where you still see them from your Veeam console, but they're actually sitting in a cloud, an object-based storage much further out there, which lets you, achieve some cost savings in that way. And also actually hit a third location for that data. If that's, we have a few organizations where that's actually very critical for them. They, for compliance sake, want that third location.
Yeah, and that's a great example of providers leveraging the technology given to them and doing great things with it, right? And then by that sense, also extending functionality and new services to the customers, right? So the way that that's done as well, if you have a look at the screen here, so we've got a full VBK on premises, and then we kind of copy that off. I mean, the 3-2-1 rule is important here, Jim, isn't it? But when we're doing the backup copy job and it lands on the OffsiteDataSync repository, that's SOVA, we're then leveraging the power of that portable data format that I talked about. If you remember, I talked about the metadata and the data, and as you can see in this image here, what you're seeing effectively is a shell of the data that sits on ODS's repository. In that shell, it's got metadata, and that's the only thing it's got there. And then what it does, it shifts all the data to a much cheaper location. Now that it gives you guys efficiencies of scale because now you're actually saving money in terms of your storage, but it doesn't actually change the way in which you recover. That's the key point. And that's what Jim was talking about there, is that you still have those recoverability options, even though the data is effectively separate from where the actual file is as you see it, which is great in terms of the tech. And it's only because of the way that Veeam architected the cloud tier that is actually achievable, right? So that's a great point there on that. And as we move to enhance this even more, we've got copy mode in V10. So in 9.5 update 4, which we released last year, we had move mode. In V10 we introduced copy mode and also things like immutability. Copy mode, I think, Jim, are you guys going to look at leveraging copy mode at all in terms of adding that as an additional hop or feature to your offerings?
We are actively looking at having our own object storage offering in the market, S3 compatible, as we talk right now. It's not quite ready for prime time. We will, once we have that, trust me, it'll become well known and it will definitely be rock solid.
Yeah, because also there we're talking about immutability, right? So in V10 as well, we added this immutability flag. And this is kind of cool because this kind of protects against malicious intent. So just say, or insider threat really as well. And like we like to call the insider threat protection or ITP theory, right? Where an insider, it can be malicious or otherwise. It could be an admin, Jim, that doesn't know what he's doing. First day on the job, goes in the console, deletes some files. That's a very real situation, right? So we actually brought out insider threat protection as part of 9.5. And are you guys running that yourselves at the moment as a service?
We are. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's actually something. So up until about 7 months ago, I was actually a Veeam and OffsiteDataSync customer. And when this came out, we very quickly signed up for it because the whole idea of it is that you, from one Veeam console and one set of credentials, have the capability to see both your on-prem and your off-prem backups, and also have the capability to delete those backups. What ransomware insider protection does is it allows us to then store a whole nother copy of your backup data for a given period of days, completely out of your view. We can see it from the cloud provider side, but you don't see it at all from your Veeam console and have no access to it. And so you really have that extra level of protection there that, you have a full-on ransomware or credential access issue that you've still got a set of backups that are still going to be accessible.
Yeah, that's all about protecting the latest backups, right? Because
Yep.
obviously it's protecting those deletions. So with immutability, what we're doing is we're actually looking to protect the most recent backups. Because what happens with immutability is we set an object flag or an object lock flag on the data as we send them up. As we break up the chunks of data and we separate the metadata from the data or copy the data up, we can set a immutability flag on that for X amount of days, which you guys would do as an example, or if you guys offer your object storage, your customers would do. And then effectively, when those blocks of data get shifted, they are then set as being locked as immutable, which means not even the admin can delete it, not even an Amazon admin can delete it. So that's all about protecting the most recent copy of the data, whereas inside of threat protection is copying the older data. But suffice to say, again, we're providing all these options so that guys like OffsiteDataSync can offer more services to you guys, and it's great to see them actually putting them into play. We're going to finish off talking about, I think, one of my favorite ones, Jim. I really love this feature now. I think what the ability that this gives to our providers, I see a great future in it. It's going to be a slow burn, but I think it's going to get there, right? So we call this a data integration API. And as part of V10, we released this, and what this is all about is about leveraging the Veeam backup files and basically getting to mount volumes directly to a Windows system via iSCSI, and then being able to do stuff on those particular mounted file systems, right? And this is all about, for me, the unlocking of data that would otherwise be stagnant. It's the activation of that data. As a customer out there, yeah, you're getting your data protected by OffsiteDataSync. It's going and sitting on someone else's computer somewhere effectively. But then what added value does that have apart from just a bit of security? So obviously OffsiteDataSync have been able to unlock that already by doing things like that recovery feature that they have and the product there. That's a great way of unlocking that data. But what if you could sit there and actually make it work for you? What if you could mount that data, have it as a service, and then be able to run like some data classification tools over that data, like search for PCI compliancy, search for malware, so doing some enhanced security. It's really about that read-only copy and be able to then interrogate the data as it sits there. And this is a good example of what it can do, right? Data reuse. Again, we look at that activation of the data. So by the publishing command, this is what the cloud provider would do basically as a service, is the way that I envisage this if I was looking to design a service, is I would look at saying, okay, you've mounted your data, we're now giving you access to that. You can now run a third-party application over that yourself, or we can provide one. Machine learning could be anything really, to do some security analysis, data classification, some business intelligence, or some DevOps or DevSecOps. Not that I love saying those words, but that's kind of exactly what you can do. The most simplest example that I can see in this one, Jim, is so you have a backup, and it's a backup of a file server, and you want to basically know if someone's storing credit card information on there. And Amex credit cards all start with a similar 4-number digit, right? So you can basically take a amount, you can use a data integration API, and then ODS can run the tool and do a scan for that and provide reporting on what credit cards are on that file system, okay? So again, this is more about the activation of data, making sure that it is worth something more than just a backup set used for insurance purposes. But Jim, what's your take on it? And what's ODS looking to create around this particular product?
Yeah, so I am extremely excited about this feature, and I got to tell you, Anthony, I love you really going into the technical deep end with the doing stuff of against our backups.
I love saying that, doing stuff.
Yeah, extremely technical, and that's I use the same term all the time. But yeah, so unfortunately, I can't get too deep into the woods of what OffsiteDataSync is doing with this at this point, because
don't give it away. Don't give it away.
It's currently in development, but if you look at the J2 global brand that we are a part of now, there's 180 different companies under that umbrella, and a lot of them have to do with information security. So you can kind of draw your own conclusions from there. but yeah, there's a lot of capabilities here. You know, like I said, the company I came from was a small government organization, and you know, for compliance reasons, we had to, you know, once a year talk to the auditors, and one of the questions was exactly the question you're talking about: where are we storing credit card data, and how are we storing it? And you know, one of the things that we typically would have to do is find out, you know, who's throwing credit card data in Word files, and then make sure we knock those down. And this is a great way to do that without actually having to hit your production systems to find the information, potentially. But yeah, there's so much promise here. It's just, it's actually really exciting.
That's one of the keys, Jim. I think it's the fact that you're not impacting production systems, because the data is literally mounted from the repository straight away. But the data is still there. I mean, if you've got RPOs of 15 minutes, I mean, that's fairly high RPOs, but if you've got that sort of an RPO, then you know that data isn't that old, and it potentially it's not changed that much. So you're mounting it, it's there, it's safe, and you can do what you want with it. So really cool feature of V10 there. All right, and just to finish off, I mean, you know, we touched on three, I think. I said four initially, but we touched on three major features and capabilities of V10. So, you know, obviously this was more than just a VCSP release. But that said, I mean, like I said, our VCSPs will take any of these features that we've got listed and potentially use them. So, you know, of the 100 plus additional new features, Jim, what ones sort of stand out to you that you know, think is valuable for your customers potentially?
Yeah, so especially for our customers, the ones that, you know, I keep hitting on all the time. And so I love the new mirrored mode for backup copy, where effectively you have your backup job on-prem, and rather than having to go through and say, here's this backup job and here's this backup copy job that are both independently, you know, selecting what VMs you've got, and, you know, it requires human intervention or, you know, built-in automation that increase risk. It's just a straight copy. And the layered beauty on top of that, we now have the capability to do transaction log backups going to cloud providers now, which is a brand new thing. So, you know, most customers we want to go through, and, you know, for our SQL servers, especially that are high write, you know, have them go through and do hourly truncations of those logs and things like that. Now we can ship those offsite as well, where before it was just a daily roll up. Internally, we're extremely excited about the Linux backup proxies. This lets us, you know, save a lot in terms of Windows licensing and create some new automation capabilities that maybe were a little harder to do before. You know, those are our real highlights at this point.
Cool, good stuff. All right then. So yeah, look, there's heaps of features, heaps of benefits. I mean, the great thing is if you guys are customers of ODS, are leveraging their services, you know, you get the best of both worlds really, because with V10 you get to upgrade and get all of these features and enhancements for yourself, while being able to leverage the smart things that ODS does with our technology, doing great things with great tech. So yeah, really good. Yeah, Jim, so did you want to take over and kind of finish off?
Yeah, so we've got a few little things that are a little more ODS centric, but still very Veeam related. We kind of wanted to talk about. So, you know, we offer services to a number of backup providers, but by very far and large, Veeam is our biggest partner, and we love this relationship. You know, just kind of a quick understanding. You know, we're not a new guy on the block. We've been around for 20 years. We've many times been the Veeam Partner of the Year. You know, lots of stability. You know, last year we were acquired by J2 Global, which is a very large company and a global leader in cloud services. So there's a lot of stability and resources that we're really excited to be able to leverage. And especially as part of that, we now have an actual global presence, or a more global presence than before. So we've gone from having environments all over the US and an environment in Europe and another one in Asia to, I think there's 28 data centers at this point. I will say, so if you're looking at us from outside of North America, you'll see our brand is Keep It Safe, but it's the same service, the same architecture, the same stability that you would see otherwise. You know, I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but you know, one of the big features in V10 was the capability to kind of replace your backup copy with S3 through the copy mode or excuse me, move mode, copy mode of cloud tier. But, like I said, I can't hit home on this enough. So, by and large, a lot of our customers are SMB or people that don't want to put lots and lots of resources into managing and watching your backups and knowing the full run book, or maybe don't have that experience in creating the disaster recovery scenario. So, getting up and going with copy mode is very doable. It's very good. The question that I typically like to propose to you is, what does that look like if you're going to restore that information and your on-prem data center isn't available? We have a really, really good answer to that. We can put you in your own vCloud Director instance and have you up and running typically within a number of hours and off to go, and we will be your guiding hand, your white glove service, however you'd like to put that throughout the entire process. And then, finally, we can talk about, what are the different ways to actually think about taking your on-prem workloads and getting them out to the cloud. And, one thing to think about, a lot of customers, and, especially Anthony, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, their Veeam is backup and replication. And when it comes,
indeed,
yeah, but a lot of times we only think of it in terms of backup, and the backup's great. We love it. We can go and we can restore those things in a few hours off either on-prem or on-prem, and we can test against those. Alternatively, Replica, which is also supported with OffsiteDataSync, is we can replicate you now, since version 9.5, directly into vCloud Director, to where you have your own instance, you have complete control over those workloads. And if you have an event going on-prem, like, for example, you find out your internet service provider is going to be going dark for a while, or you're going to have a power outage like we saw in California a couple years ago, the rolling blackouts and things like that. You can proactively go through yourself and fail over to our IaaS environment and be running from us the same as you would be on-prem. And we can help, or you can do that all by yourself. One thing that you can think about is actually doing a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So I'm a big personal advocate of the hybrid disaster recovery scenario, just as something to think about. So you have all of your workloads running on-prem, and there's things that don't need to get up immediately. They're not mission critical applications. Well, those we push to a backup as a service offering from ODS. And the things that you actually need, the customer facing, I need to be able to order widget X. We can throw those into a replication plan running side by side with your backup and be able to tier how we do your restore scenarios or how you do your disaster recovery scenarios. And we are happy as a team here at ODS to help you work and develop that strategy to make the most out of your, frankly, budget, to make your disaster recovery make sense for you and your organization. And finally, what the last thing that I always get to, and Anthony, like I said, Anthony and I've been friends for a long time. He knows this is my own personal pet peeve. An untested backup is nothing but expensive, unverified data. If you aren't testing your backups, Veeam, yeah, it just works, but there's always things that can go wrong. And I highly recommend that you find ways to test your backups. For us, one of the things that makes ODS unique is we do actually, with all of our platinum customers, include 2 annual DR tests for our Pro Plus customers. Those are available as well at a pretty reasonable fee, to be real honest. And if you have the wherewithal and know what you want to do on-prem, there's always data labs available to do that testing on-site in your own environment. And so with that, we're going to wrap up here for the day. I appreciate everybody's time. I did want to say that, OffsiteDataSync, as I said, is a big partner with Veeam. We support the entire stack of their backup products. Right now, we're running a promotion that if you purchase a number of Microsoft Office 365 backup services from us, we're giving you free DR as a service, so replication capability. And I invite you to do that. And at this point, I'd like to see if there's I'd like to open it up to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat. We've got a couple minutes left here until our 45 minutes are up. Okay, well, with that, guys, Anthony, especially, I'd like to say thank you for joining me today. And
thanks, Jim. Thanks for getting me on. And yeah, it was great having a session with you and talking about ODS, one of our great partners in the VCSP space.
Yeah, and thank you all. Thank you, and thank you all for joining. I see a couple questions wondering about the presentation. Yeah, there will be a recording and a PDF put out on the internet sometime in the near future. Watch all of our social media channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever you like to see, the announcements that those are available. And I invite you to reach out to our partners in sales email addresses at OffsiteDataSync to get in contact with us about, offering services. Thank you and have a great day.
See you guys.